Nathan Zegura does a great job covering the Cleveland Browns, and he's a part of their radio broadcast as he's in the booth as their color analyst, and he's kind enough to join us right now on the Zach Gelb Show. Nathan, appreciate the time. Thanks so much for doing this, and how you been?
My pleasure. It's been a whirlwind, a wild kind of weekend here for the Cleveland Browns, a Saturday unlike any I can remember in my 13 years doing Saturday draft radio for the Browns with the addition of Shedeur Sanders. But I think a good draft. I can tell you the building's energized over what they got, and not only the players that they added this year, but the fact that they got a future first rounder in 2026 as well.
It was a wild kind of draft process the last 3 days, because in the build-up to it, there were legitimate conversations about a month ago about the Browns taking Shedeur Sanders at 2. Then everyone kind of zeroed in. It was going to be Travis Hunter. We know they make the deal where Travis Hunter goes to Jacksonville, and then you look at Mason Graham winding up in Cleveland. But how about just on Saturday when the whole world is looking at Shedeur Sanders, waiting to see where he goes? Cleveland in the third round takes Dillon Gabriel. Like, was anyone actually thinking that the fifth, round selection, they go and make the move at 144, that it was actually going to be Shedeur? Like, was that on your radar when you guys were sitting there in the facility?
No, once they took Dillon Gabriel, that really was not on my radar. I knew that the Browns certainly like Shedeur Sanders, and I think it's pretty clear based on what happened that, a lot of people around the league, and basically everybody who does this for a living, had either a first or a second round kind of grade on Shedeur based on his tape alone. And then now a lot of the stories are coming out, but basically it was he kind of had a brutal pre-draft process. And so he falls. Once they took Gabriel, I probably thought they were done at quarterback, but I remember I was on the air. We had our director of player personnel, Dan Sagan. He was in studio with us. Now, he was obviously privy because as soon as the fourth round ended, the Browns had kind of made the decision like, okay, well, let's go get him. So he knew it was coming. And while he was in the studio with us on the air talking about the Dylan Sampson pick, Browns were on the clock. We're like, hey, we're on the clock now. And he kind of shot me a look. And he knew I was a big Shedeur Sanders fan from the tape. So he kind of shot me a look and was like, I probably should go. So he goes into the war room. And I remember I looked at our producer, Jason Gibbs, and I looked over him and he looked at me and his eyes kind of like bugged out of his head because he was on the NFL system. And I was like, no way. And he's like, and then I was like, oh man, here we go. So I like it. Look, we need a quarterback. That's been the problem since really Bernie Kosar was under center for the Cleveland Browns. And, they love Dillon Gabriel. Kevin Stefanski loves Dillon Gabriel. You see how he would operate this offense and fit into it. And then Shedeur Sanders, is a very gifted, very productive player, the all-time leader in completion percentage in college football history. So I think they were thrilled to get these guys, and now you're going to have a competition. They brought Kenny Pickett in as well. So you got 3 young guys on rookie deals. Kenny Pickett, a former first-rounder. You got Shedeur and now Dillon Gabriel, who you spent basically a 5th round, a 3rd round, and then a 5th and a 6th round on. So you got 3 bites at the apple to see if you can find somebody.
Yeah, I'm with you. I thought he should have been a first-round pick at some point. I understand with what was been told about the pre-draft process why he falls to the 2nd. I thought it was nuts after he fell through round number 3, and then ultimately he goes in the 5th round at 144. But you look at the destination, like you talked about, the other quarterbacks really on the roster, because forget about Deshaun Watson. You got Joe Flacco, you got Kenny Pickett, you got Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur. I think this is a good opportunity where we're going to see at some point this year Shedeur Sanders start games for the Cleveland Browns, and he could end up being, if he plays up to the talent and he gets through some of the pre-draft problems and learns from that, this could be the steal of the draft for the Browns.
Absolutely, and that's why it's a very minimal risk and a tremendous upside selection there. I'm with you. I think it's up to Shedeur, right? If Shedeur Sanders comes in here and maximizes the gifts that he has, I think there is a good chance that he will start some games. I know that the Browns think Dillon Gabriel's capable of starting games. We saw what Joe Flacco did in his time here, but I think if you're looking at a longer horizon, a guy in his 40s is not the long-term answer, and the Browns certainly would love to find that long-term answer. Kenny Pickett's 15-10 as a starter in the league, but this is going to be a really interesting offseason. There are only so many reps. And that, I think, is going to be the real challenge is how do you divvy up these reps to get these guys ready, give them a shot to realistically really compete against one another, but also have your team be ready for the start of the season. But, yeah, this could be a transformative draft for the Cleveland Browns if either Shedeur or Dillon Gabriel ends up being that guy, or if the pick they sent for Kenny Pickett, ends up being that guy. But that's kind of, I think, the thought process behind it. We don't have one. Let's get another. We really, really like this kid's tape. As you said, first round, the people that were, quote unquote, his tape detractors. I talked with Greg Cosell, who I respect as much as anybody on planet Earth. He's an early 2nd round pick. but that was like the bottom end of it, and you get him at pick 144, so why not?
So let me just ask you this, because we were talking about this, Nathan Zegura, before you came on. Forget about Watson because he's hurt, and I don't think he'll ever play again for Cleveland. But you look at the four other quarterbacks. Flacco they signed, Pickett they traded for, and they just drafted Gabriel in the 3rd round, Shedeur like we're talking about in the 5th round. I would be surprised when the season starts if Gabriel and Shedeur aren't on the roster. Is the competition really to see who that other quarterback is that they take, who end up could being the starter, really between Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco in your estimation?
I think it's probably too early to say that, but I think that, I think when they brought Joe Flacco in, they thought they were going in this draft with Kenny Pickett, Flacco, and they were going to draft Dylan Gabriel. That was basically the Browns' target in this draft. Once they knew they couldn't get Cam Ward, that was the guy they wanted, and that's why they took him. They took him obviously a little earlier than I think most people thought he would have gone, but one thing people need to remember is when they made the trade with Jacksonville, they traded down about 20 spots in the 4th round as a part of that deal, and I think if they had 94 and 105, then they're probably maybe they take somebody at 94 and they get Dylan Gabriel at 105. But once they dropped all the way down to 126, they thought, let's not wait 32 picks. We really like Dylan Gabriel. Let's take him. So they get Dylan Gabriel there. As far as the quarterback competition, I asked, Kevin Stefanski about this yesterday. I was able to do an interview with him for our draft review show here. We'll see how it plays out. I think if you're looking big picture, you'd say, well, we got 3 guys that we want to see. Why would we play a guy in his 40s? But Joe Flacco is, quite frankly, he is a hero here. I love the guy. He was great for us. We had that magical run, obviously, at the end of 23 when he won 4 straight games, get us into the playoffs. Flacco fever was running wild. He was so productive. So there's that element to it. Maybe they keep 4 quarterbacks. I was actually joking with Coach Stefanski about that yesterday, and he said, has anybody ever done that before? I said, I don't think so, but you never know. I think you kind of have a right read on that. My guess is, right now, if one of these rookies can come up and seize it, they'll get an opportunity. But, they like Kenny Pickett here. Kenny Pickett's 15-10 as a starter, as I said, 7 game-winning drives. The offense that he operated in, while his numbers are not great, was, Matt Canada was kind of roundly considered to be one of the worst offensive coordinators in the league. He's no longer obviously employed in that capacity. And they think he's a good fit. What you see with the 3 themes of these quarterbacks is, accurate, good decision makers, tough. And if you can be that in this offense where it's going to give you, now that we drafted Judkins, we drafted Dylan Sampson, I would not rule out Nick Chubb's return as well. You're going to get back to running the football. You're going to get back to that under center play action boot game that is Stefanski, McVay, all of Shanahan, that type of a system, the old Kubiak system. And I think that all 3 of these quarterbacks, if they win in the same ways, or if they're going to win in the NFL, be successful, it will be the same way. From the pockets, making these reads, being accurate and on time with the football, and then being tough. And they think all 3 of these guys have that. And we'll see. We know Joe Flacco can do it. We've seen him operate this offense and throw for 300 yards 5 straight games.
Why wouldn't you rule out a return for Nick Chubb, just out of curiosity?
Because Nick Chubb is in many ways kind of the heart of this. He's beloved by our fans. He is beloved by this organization. And I think that there are a lot of people that want Nick Chubb in this organization and outside of it, fans of the organization, that if Nick Chubb is playing football in the National Football League, they want him to be doing it as a Cleveland Brown. Like, I'm sitting in my studio right now in the headquarters. I look to my left. There is a mural that is, 8 feet by 20 feet or 10 feet by 20 feet of Nick Chubb. Like, that is on the main hallway of this building. So that he is beloved here. And I think if there's a way that they can offer him a compensation package that he would be happy with, and I know he would like it as well, that he will be a Cleveland Brown still. Even with the young guys.
Yeah, wrap it up. Nathan Zegura does a great job in the Browns radio booth on the Browns radio network. Getting back to Dylan Gabriel. So my pre-draft rankings, I loved Cam Ward 1. I had Shedeur Sanders 2. Then 3rd, I had Jalen Milroe. I actually put Dylan Gabriel 4th and then Jackson Dart 5. And I got a lot of blowback and pushback. Oh, how could you put Dylan Gabriel as 4? So I'm someone that's pro Dylan Gabriel. What do you think, or what's your understanding of why the Browns loved him so much, where you were saying after Cam Ward, he was their 2nd quarterback on their board?
Yeah, he was the target. He wins the way that Kevin Stefanski, at least in my understanding of him, wants a quarterback to win. Great decision maker, accurate from the pocket, can throw on the move in both directions. He's very tough. They love his pocket movement. And one of the things that Kevin Stefanski told me was, we kept watching the tape. We kept being like, where does the height show up? Because that's the knock on him, right? If Dylan Gabriel's 6'3", He probably is the number 2 pick in this draft, to be perfectly honest with you, everything else being the same. He started more games than anybody in college football history, 63. In 3 different programs, he's had seasons where he's thrown for 30 touchdowns with 6 or fewer interceptions. He's thrown more touchdowns than anybody in the history of the FBS. He's played a lot of football. He's very mature. And while a lot of people talk about the pre-draft process of Shedeur Sanders, you can ask a lot of people around the league, and I've heard this from quarterback coaches on other teams as well. He had the best pre-draft process of anybody. Just mature, gets it, so good on the whiteboard, completely understands the concepts, understands the playbook, understands what he is being asked to do in the offense. And so they saw a guy that they thought could be a very efficient ball distributor and operator of their operation and of their offense, and think that what he excels at is what this system requires a quarterback to excel at.
Now, I'm not an old man, but I've been doing this long enough. No offense to Joe Flacco, Dillon Gabriel, or Kenny Pickett, and it's an open job. People are going to want to see Shedeur Sanders play, especially with what happened at the draft. How do you think they'll manage that hype machine of Shedeur Sanders? Because I know he's a 5th-round pick. I know he could be viewed as a backup quarterback right now, but in reality, I don't think that's the reaction that a lot of fans are going to have on their view of Shedeur.
No, I think that in some ways it's a good thing that he went here, and I think in many ways Shedeur has become a very sympathetic figure, because that was fair or unfair, and I think probably got a lot of bad advice and handled things differently, and he acknowledged that. That's a very public humiliation. Like, every mock draft, I said this about our draft the other day, that if you had told somebody who, let's call it 10 days prior to the draft, was locked away in a cave and got to know nothing about what was going to happen in this draft, no science, and they come out and you say, the Browns got Mason Graham, Shedeur Sanders, Schlesinger, Judkins, Fannin, Dillon Gabriel, Dylan Sampson, and a future first, and you say that's impossible. Or you could say that same person, here, I'll give you $1 million. I'm going to give you 10 chances. Order the draft picks. Order the way that the Browns selected these players.
Zero shot.
Impossible. So it is unique in that he is a much better talent than what his draft position afforded him. We're going to see what that learning curve is for him, right? I think that he will be given every opportunity to be successful here, as will Dillon Gabriel. I think it's going to be cool that they're going to have each other. They're going to have Joe Flacco, who can teach these guys a lot about what it really means to be an under center, back to the defense, play action quarterback. That's something that they don't do a ton of in college anymore. So he'll be given the chance. Fans will want to see him. They're going to get to see him, I'm sure, a lot in the preseason, but he's going to be given what he earns, because that's really the way it is now. It is a competition. You have 3 people who are going to be very hungry to make a career for themselves. And Kenny Pickett, and obviously came highly recommended from Philadelphia in his time there. And the connections between our front office, Andrew Berry, Howie Roseman, his twin brothers in the front office there in Philly. So that wasn't a trade that was made without very good feelings and knowledge. And from the Philly standpoint, it's like, look, this is Jalen Hurts' team. We liked him. Let's give this guy a shot. The irony for Kenny Pickett is his best fit in Pittsburgh would have been in Arthur Smith's offense and never got to play in it. So now you get a similar type of a situation here. So these guys are all going to get opportunities. And I think really it's going to be a cream rises, type situation. And Shedeur, I think, he is a great ball of clay, a lot of talent. And if he can come in and execute the operation of things, I think he has a very good chance to play this year.
What's your gut right now? I know it's so early, but if you had to just throw a dart on the board, who's starting week 1? Who would you say right now?
My dart would Kenny Pickett.
Wow. That would be something. How do you think that'd go over with Browns fans if Pickett started in week 1?
I think I believe that if he was starting, it would be because it was apparent that he was the best quarterback. Listen, here's a sobering stat, and I say this to some of my friends all the time. The fact of the matter is, Kenny Pickett is 15-10 as a starter in the National Football League. That's a 60% winning percentage. I've been with this organization since 2012. He has the best winning percentage of any quarterback who's ever played for the Cleveland Browns. At 60%. Second's Joe Flacco. Third is Deshaun Watson. And then fourth would be Baker by the time he got out of here. I'm talking about people who started more than like a game. Most of our guys who started one game did not win those games anyway. But he has the best winning percentage. 7 of those 14 wins with the Pittsburgh Steelers came in game. He organized a game-winning drive. So there is something clutch about him. He's a better mover than people think. I'll go back to that offense. Now, there are people that say you are limited in how you can win with Kenny Pickett at quarterback. Well, that may be true. We just haven't seen him in this offense. So I think if he looks like the guy, remember, he was a first-round pick, and like I said, he's won in the NFL. That Browns fans should be pretty happy with a guy who was a first-round pick that's won in the NFL. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think you would have to earn it and have to be pretty clear, that he was the guy. And I think we'll see from Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, what does this look like this offseason? I think everybody knows what they have in Joe Flacco. And so the question will be more philosophically, do we want, if they're marginally close to him, are we playing a 40-year-old, or are we trying to get answers about our young quarterbacks?
Last thing
And that'll be it.
Yeah, last thing I'll ask you, Nathan Zegura, then I'll let you run. And I appreciate you doing this. Just out of curiosity, when 2 did go down and they traded back to 5, did that catch you by surprise? Like 2 hours before the draft, it started to leak out that the Browns were listening and they were getting phone calls and the Jaguars were potentially moving up. But, a day before the draft, if you would have asked me, I would have said it was 100% going to be Travis Hunter going second overall. So take me through your understanding of that process.
So it was, and it's been said publicly now, but that trade was done for 2 weeks.
Wow.
For 2 weeks, and kept completely secret. Completely secret. I had an idea through my role here that,
something was
Mason
up.
Graham was certainly in play for our first pick. And using my mind, I said that's probably not at number 2, but you never know. But I knew that he was somebody we were very enamored with in this process, and that it was realistic that he would be the first pick of the Cleveland Browns. So I give kudos to this organization, and I give kudos to the Jags organization for keeping that under wraps in this day and age for a couple of weeks. Obviously, it was contingent upon, and the reason it didn't happen before the draft was, should the Titans have zigged and taken Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter themselves, Browns would have stayed at 2 and taken Cam Ward. Because that trade happened, then they make their move. So I was surprised, but when you think about what is the number one goal of this organization, obviously it's to win games, win Super Bowl. What do you need to do that? If we're being honest about it, is you need a franchise quarterback. That if it was kind of Cam Ward or let's say Dylan Gabriel in this draft, who was not going to, the idea of getting a future first-round pick had to be very appealing so that you had that flexibility to maybe take another swing at this next year. And so when they got that back, I wasn't surprised at all for 3 spots. Now, I'll tell you what I was surprised by, and I mean this in a very pleasant way, was that I saw that they got picked 36 as well. I'm like, how could you not do that? And so now it's Mason Graham, Quinshon Judkins, and that future first still out there. It's such a haul, given that we had so many needs, it makes sense, but it allows this draft to be significantly better, and it also sets you up for next year. So I love Travis Hunter. I think he's a unicorn. I don't know if he embodies belief or not. That's for other people to debate or say, but he clearly has a chance to maybe reinvent how we think about what the human being is capable of in the National Football League. That's intriguing, but you have to think big picture, and still at the end of the day, for a quarter to get that haul for a non-quarterback is kind of unprecedented. And now the Browns are still a couple bites at the apple this year and a potential now to still do it in the future. So I understood it from like that standpoint.
He does a kick-ass job on the Browns radio network. He, of course, is Nathan Zegura. Nathan, really appreciate the time and the insight. Thank you.
You got it, guys. Thanks for having me.